All right, so I think we have a very interesting panel coming ahead on Enteric research efforts and opportunities. And the way this will work is that we will have a moderated Q&A following opening statements. And so we'll go through our 4 panelists one by one. I'll introduce them quickly, and then they each have about 5 minutes or so, a short presentation, and then, we'll discuss. So the first panelist I want to introduce is Dr. Juan Tricarico, who is a Senior Vice President for Environmental Research at Dairy Management, Inc. He's the past president for the Council of Agricultural Science and Technology, CAST. Before joining DMI, Tricarico worked for Alltech, where he developed and evaluated feed additives focusing on ruminal fermentation and its implication on rumen microbiology, carbohydrate fermentation, and nitrogen utilization in ruminants. With that, the floor is yours. Yes.
Yep, sounds good. Good morning. Can you hear me all right? Wonderful. Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and open up then with some brief remarks. I do want to start by saying that I do work for Dairy Management, Inc., which is the company that manages the checkoff for dairy farmers. We have more than 29,000 dairy farmers across the entire country. And our mandate is to increase the demand for milk and dairy foods, across the country and overseas as well. I am going to speak about Enteric research efforts and opportunities. I only have a few slides, and I'm going to just go through them. They're going to help me probably more than you. So I appreciate your patience with me on this. I'm going to show you some stuff that you already seen. I'm pretty sure everybody has seen some of this stuff. But I wanted to make sure that we start from a basis. And the basis is that there are many options for addressing enteric methane emissions, many of which have been studied to some extent. But when you start to narrow down the desired attributes for them, that really long list becomes short very quickly. At least that's what Arndt and others have told us in this PNAS study. You can see that their definition of effective was either decrease methane intensity and increase production, or decrease methane without reducing production. And these were the 8 out of 98 that met those criteria. I also want to show you this slide, which is an adaptation of the paper by Boschemin and co-authors, which is in fact, Aimable, the chapter 5 of the FAO report that you alluded to earlier. And you see somewhat of a similar type of situation. In this case, the group of scientists, we kind of narrow it down, not 98, we only, examined 30 mitigation options. But when you start looking at what's available, once again, you set up those criteria in order to figure out which ones have the attributes that are desirable, and the list, once again, goes down. I do want to make one quick comment here, and that is in this particular slide, and in this particular short list, there's also a call out for a couple of promising enteric methane emissions, and the one that I want to call out is natural selection of low-emitting animals, because that one is a long-term play. It's one of those types of emission or mitigation strategies that can probably do very little every year, but it's permanent and cumulative, and over a longer period of time can actually make a big difference, which is quite different than the feed additive approach that we're going to discuss to a greater extent, which is a shorter term mitigation practice where the emission mitigation occurs while the additives are being fed. The one point that I do want to make for both of these slides, which once again, nothing new here, is that farmers need options. At the end of the day, it's their business and it's their decision to do something on their farms, right? And we're all here evaluating and trying to many of you, in fact, out in the audience, are trying to develop products, right? And what we would like to see are multiple options, so that then farmers can find the ones that work for their particular situations. And in many instances, I expect those to be combinations of options as well. We were asked to talk a little bit about the research needs as well. And so I wanted to make a comment here very quickly, only about a minute or so, that we have some experience because we worked, DMI worked with the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research to put together a framework for collaboration, which evolved into the Greener Cattle Initiative. And so you can see in this slide all of the organizations that eventually joined the Greener Cattle Initiative. I want to make a point here. In the United States, the Greener Cattle Initiative is the first initiative that put out a request for proposals or request for applications to specifically address research on enteric methane mitigation in a very narrow manner for both beef and dairy cattle. You know, the other funding organizations, particularly government organizations, have funded a lot of research, you know, over time. Usually this is broadly defined, and in many instances, many of the researchers have to compete even without other subsectors within agriculture for those funds. But this one was the first one to specifically approach bovine enteric methane emissions here in the United States. I want to make a very quick comment about the fact that we are going to make announcements later this year. We received more than 100 letters of intent, and we've selected 3 projects. Negotiations are in their final stages, and we are going to award more than the $5 million that we targeted to begin with. So we are extremely excited about this. And obviously, you've already read all of the research areas that we focused on. So I'm going to move on to the last bit of my remarks here. And it's something that is actually nobody has seen yet. This is the first time this slide is up for anywhere, for anybody, okay? And this slide basically represents work that DMI conducted by engaging the dairy value chain. Many of you sitting in the audience contributed to this, so thank you very much. You know who you are. Because we wanted to understand what was that list, that wish list of desired attributes for feed additives to reduce enteric methane emissions. And so you can see that as a result of those conversations, we've synthesized all of that intelligence into 12 insights. Those 12 insights allowed us to put together an evaluation tool that is now on the DMI website. And it also allowed us to identify a number of best practices that are currently available for the dairy value chain to follow. But also there are some best practices that are going to be very critical for us as a value chain to develop in the next few years. One of them, for example, is standards for evidence. Okay, and I hope that that's going to come up in the question and answer session. So with that, I want to thank you very much, and I'm done.
Thank you, Juan. Our next panelist is Denise Mullinax, and Denise is the Executive Director of the California Dairy Research Foundation, which is an independent and non-profit foundation with a mission to lead and deliver the best research and science-based programs in support of the California dairy industry. She has more than 20 years of experience working with the California dairy sector, holding key education, research, and sustainability management positions within UC Cooperative Extension and at Hilmer Cheese Company. Concurrent with her duties at CDRF, she also serves as the Assistant Director of the California Dairy Quality Assurance Program, CDQAP, a position that has held for the past 13 years. With that, thank you very much, Denise. The floor is yours.
All right, there we go. Can you hear me okay? All right, well, good morning, everyone. I'm super pleased to be here and be part of the panel and talk with you just a little bit this morning about what CDRF has done in the way of research around methane emissions reductions. But before I get started with that, just again, a little background, although Frank gave you a little bit about CDRF and who we are. We are a nonprofit public research organization. We are primarily funded by the California Milk Advisory Board, so California dairy producer checkoff dollars. Our mission really is to enable a sustainable California dairy industry, and we do that by leading and delivering research programs as well as scientific education programs, and we're really hard to collaborate and partner with our other industry organizations. So our work really focuses in 5 main areas. Those are social responsibility, capability building, environmental management, product innovation, human health and nutrition. And currently, our strategic plan calls for our largest focus to be on environmental management because of the pressures on our California dairy industry that we have upon us and have had upon us for several years now. So speaking of that, due to the pressures on our industry here in the state, as well as the specific goals that had been laid out before us on methane reduction, CDRF is really focused on methane reduction efforts for several years now. Our work is really focused in 3 main buckets, and the first one is industry-wide analysis, right? So just understanding what our emissions as an industry look like over time, what they look like today versus what they looked like 50 years ago. We also have undertaken a couple of studies that we have funded with researchers looking specifically at the economic evaluation of strategies. What are those strategies that make the most sense for our smaller facilities versus what are those strategies that maybe make more sense for some of our larger facilities in the state, knowing that we're all striving towards a common goal. And then in addition to that, we've also just recently funded a study, which I think is going to be published soon, is what I keep hearing, about the evaluation for when California will actually reach climate neutrality. So we're excited for that to be published here pretty soon. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the last general project that we have that's industry-wide, and that one was already referred to by Secretary Bonnie this morning, and that we are very proud to be the recipients of an $85 million grant from USDA. That project was truly a collaborative project. I really need to give credit to others that are in the room, CDFA, the UC, Dairy Cares, the organizations that were supportive of that. The list goes on and on. So we're very thrilled. We think we're going to have a final contract here pretty soon. That's the rumor, to get started with that project here this spring. And it will really be focusing on methane emissions reductions, but there could be some other possibilities in there. Specifically, we're looking to implement advanced manure technologies on our dairy facilities and then do some evaluations of those, really understand how those can be effective on our dairies and educate our producers as to how those work. So more directly in terms of our research directed at feeds and feedstuff and enteric emissions, we do have a few studies that have focused on this one. The first one is just a feed formulation study where one of the researchers did some analysis for us. And as we have fluctuations in our feeds and our rations that are being formulated, what is the impact on greenhouse gas reductions? What reductions can we expect out of that? In addition to that, we're actually working with one of our researchers currently on 2 specific feedstuffs. A lot of our products are products, right? So companies are doing the research on them. But there's a few other things that we think can have some benefits to us. And so we've undertaken a couple of studies in that area, one of them being with grape marc or grape pumice. So that will specifically be looking at what are the reductions that can be achieved through the feeding of that product, as well as a flaxseed product, which is pretty exciting because not only has it shown that it can reduce enteric emissions, but also that it can increase the omega-3 fatty acids in the milk and the milk products that are derived from the cows, that are produced by the cows that are being fed that product. So that's pretty exciting. The third bucket for CDRF has really focused on a reduction protocol, and we're very proud to have co-funded some studies in this area to develop a protocol, right, which will accomplish two things for us. One, that will really provide some procedures to actually quantify what are the reductions that we're achieving from these feedstuffs that are being fed. And then second, it'll allow for the ability for dairy producers and others throughout the dairy value chain to be able to claim those reductions, to bring those dollars back through the system and actually provide benefits to the dairy producers that are feeding, paying for those feeds and incorporating them on the dairies. So we were also asked, in addition to what we're actually doing in the way of research, to talk about future research needs. And I think that those research needs are probably pretty apparent to all of us. We can probably agree upon them. But as an organization that's funded by dairy producers and works very closely with dairy producers, one of the areas that we need to do is just continue to fill that profile, if you will, and build up that body of proof and that body of information for our dairy producers, because we are asking them to modify what they're feeding their cows, right? To modify what they are feeding their cows, which impacts not only their productivity, but their milk components and their bottom line. So we need to continue to do third-party research of these and to bolster the scientific proof to show them that these products are going to be beneficial for their cows, right? That they're going to have great cow acceptability. There's not going to be hits to their productivity, and they can be fed cost effectively. And most of all, there's going to be customer acceptance for feeding those, right? Because ultimately we are producing food to feed the world. And so consumers have to be willing to buy those products that are produced by feeding these additives. So we've got to make sure that that is part of the equation. I think the other thing that we need to evaluate really has to do with the persistence of reductions. Again, we're dealing with the rumen microbiome, right? And so we're dealing with the biological system. So do we see adaptation over time, or do we continue to see those reductions as we're feeding that over time? That's important for us to understand. And are there any long-term impacts on our animals, on the health, on the longevity of our animals, right? We need to make sure that's part of the equation. And the last but not least, there was a question that was asked already, but I think the stackability, right? So if we feed something, I don't want to give product names, but if we feed more than one type of feed additive that works through a different pathway, are the reductions that we see, are they additive? Do we get the sum of both, or do we get something in between? So I feel like we've made some really good progress over this last several years collectively, but I feel like there's still a lot more research that really just needs to be done before producers and others are really going to be willing to embrace feed additives as part of the equation. And we all know they're very needed as part of the equations. A lot of the studies are already showing us very clearly that we need them in order to hit the goal, but we have to make sure that we understand what that looks like, and we have to understand that producers also understand and have confidence in those products. So, thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Our next panelist is Charles Brooke, one of the main organizers for this event here. He's the lead scientist for the short-lived climate pollutant section within the Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation at the California Department of Food and Ag, and he is the opportunity manager for the California Livestock Methane Measurement, Mitigation, and Thriving Environments Research Program. Wow, that's a mouthful. Charles has a diverse background in applied microbiology, including enteric methane mitigation, food safety, and water quality. Previously, he was the lab manager for Systems Microbiology and Natural Products Group at UC Davis, and Microbiology Data Management and Coordinator for Bioinformatics at the State Water Resources Control Board. Charles, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, thank you all for being here again. A lot of us put a lot of effort in getting you all in the room together, so I appreciate everyone actually showing up. I wanted to take a moment to talk about some of the opportunities out of the Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation, which is housed in the Executive Office of the California Department of Food and Agriculture. And really, when we look at greenhouse gas emissions and the role of agriculture, we can start breaking down the numbers. And some of you have seen a lot of this. I know a lot of my Carb folks built this. But looking at 9%, that 9% piece of the pie from agriculture and forestry, and breaking that 9% down in the contributions to different livestock sectors. So, which is largely from manure management and enteric fermentation. And this is not just dairy, this is dairy and livestock, beef pasture systems as well. So really when we started to address these, we had to address what we could. There were no solutions in the beginning for enteric fermentation, and we're seeing this development right now, but they were solutions for manure management, and they had been around for quite some time. It was really more about adopting them and refining them, and we did that via our manure management programs. The first one, Alternative Manure Management Program, and this is a mechanism that incentivizes farmers to adopt practices that remove volatile solids and manage their manure in a non-liquid format, solid separation, to remove the methane production potential from manure management. And so far, we've funded over 142 projects, AMP projects in this case. $87 million worth of awards here, and this is responsible so far for 250,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent reductions in the state since the beginning of this program. Now, the larger one here, and you've heard a little bit about it today, is the Dairy Digester Research and Development Program. And this was really the technology that existed that we needed to apply. We've helped establish over 131 anaerobic digesters on dairy farms here in California. And with an investment of about $214 million of state funds, with $432 million of matching funds from private industry to get these projects off the ground. And these were responsible for 2.3 million metric tons of reductions from these programs themselves. Now, this is great. I mean, when we look at the breakdown of manure management, enteric fermentation, all of ag emissions, these two programs, these two voluntary programs, are accounting for 8.1% of the total greenhouse gas emissions reductions from the ag sector. This is a major improvement, but you see this green piece of the pie has yet to be cleaved into, and this is something we need to start to address. There were no solutions, again, for enteric fermentation that we could readily adopt and set up incentive structures for, so we have to be able to fund the baseline research into developing, and that's where we are now. So it became very clear, this is from the Meeting the Call report from Drs. Carb, Mitloehner, and Sumner here at UC Davis, but California has a goal of 40% reduction of methane from livestock. And that's overall, not just dairy. Dairy has specific numbers, but we look at dairy and livestock together, and that comes down to about 9 million metric tons CO2e total that we need to reduce. If you look at herd size reductions, these are pretty regressive herd size reductions that we're going to be seeing here. And anaerobic digestion, we're looking at about a 1.8 times of an investment that we have already in our anaerobic digesters in order to keep on track with these goals. And then alternative manure management program, looking at a 2 to 4x increase in our effort to meet these goals as well. So I'm not saying that the path is very rosy and well paved, but we do have a path forward. What became very clear is that even with these efforts, even with aggressive herd size reductions based on increases in efficiency and potentially other factors, a firm commitment to our anaerobic digester program, a firm commitment to our alternative manure management program, we are still going to need an enteric methane mitigation strategy to address the enteric emissions from dairy and livestock. And the numbers, when you add dairy and livestock together, as far as the total emissions is concerned, we're going to be short nearly about 500,000 metric tons. And to put that into perspective, I know everyone's talked about a lot of efficiency percentages for different feed additives, adoption rates. That's about 50% of the entire dairy herd adopting something with 20% effectiveness. So again, the path is not as straightforward as we'd like it to be. We do have a significant amount of work ahead of us, but it's important that we all recognize this at private industry and state level, and also federal level, to meet these guidelines and to meet these ambitious goals, so that we can put the investment where it needs to be. Now, in recognition of this, we do have recent funding for these programs. The first was $5 million appropriated to CDFA to first verify the emissions reductions associated with DDRDP and AMP, the Dairy Digester Program and Alternative Manure Management Programs. But what these funding also allowed us to do was to explore alternative methane reduction strategies, and that included enteric methane. And so we just closed the call on that, which I'll introduce shortly, and we expect these to come out very soon. And then on top of that, we recently received $10 million in greenhouse gas reduction funds, which is a fund based on CCIs from our cap and trade program. And this is specifically for scientifically demonstrated efficacy demonstration trials for feed additives or feed strategies to reduce enteric methane. Now, again, I mentioned I'm the opportunity manager for this. It sounded like a great acronym, and I made it up, and I regret making it because now I have to explain it every time. But I thought it was catchy. The acronym was CLIMATE. So this program actually closed in February, and we expect to announce awards very soon, and it does include funding for enteric methane mitigation research here. Now, we didn't wait around for just the RFA to come out. We were able to fund some other work in collaboration with our friends at Carb, funding the standard developments with Dr. Kabrab. Also, we're looking at, this is part of our three-pronged approach. First, building the framework for some of these reductions, emissions, and measurements that we're working with Dr. Kabrab. Trying to identify new possibilities and new strategies, something we're working with Dr. Hess via in vitro screening of 50 different agricultural byproducts to see if they have bioactive compounds that can reduce enteric methane emissions. And then we're also looking to support products that have demonstrated some efficacy, put together very strong demonstration projects, research trials that maybe were, lacked funding, lacked independence for researchers, and that's where we see this moving forward. We look forward to motivating some of these funds this year to fund these trials. So, with that, I want to say again, thank you all for being here, and look forward to questions.
Thanks, Charles. Last not least, our fourth panelist was already introduced, Aimable. Please take the floor and yeah.
Just want to say that there is one big and important issue is about data. So do we have data? Do we trust the data? So having really reliable data is important because if we cannot trust data, we cannot trust solutions. Therefore, moving from mainly lab-based analysis or trials to really the farm-based approaches, we need to make sure that the data are reliable. So that's the first point. So we need to make sure that we can access data that are transparent and also are well documented, because from most of greenhouse gas inventory that we see around, one of the key facts that we see all over is the data. So that's the first point. The second point, I think it's important that future research continue to address the efficiency. Efficiency in terms of feed use, efficiency in terms of productivity, especially through genetic and the breeding, but also from some of the aspects that my colleagues already mentioned about raw methane emitting animals, which I believe is one of the promising approach that's promoted, also being highly receiving more investments to research in this area. The second aspect is that we have many animals actually that are on grassland. They are on pasture. So sometimes most of our solutions in feed additive, they don't work there. So therefore, we need really to find innovative solution to improve the grazing management and having clear identification of alternative forage and pasture that can really help to improve the productivity, but also reduce emissions. This is not quite easy because especially that animals are really free in range, and sometimes it's difficult to know which species they prefer over the other species, especially in the natural rangeland. So it's important that we really understand what's happening in extensive systems, because we believe that there is a huge solution, especially most of our beef animals are in those systems. It's also important to look at animal health. As you know, with the global agreement, we had previously the Cornevia Joint Work on Agriculture, and now is the Shaman Share implementation function for climate action and food security. And we see that animal health is one of the key entry points that many countries do agree that promoting better and healthy animals can reduce emissions. So it's important that we understand how we prevent zoonotic disease, we address animal welfare, antimicrobial resistance, but also gut health. It's really important that those areas are required to address systematically, and of course then data. So we need to have data to demonstrate that all the action on animal health are having large benefit on productivity, but also on emission reduction. And I want to finalize this by talking about economics. It's important that I see some of my colleagues already mentioned about that, but we need to understand the cost of mitigation, because it's a high cost. So who pays for that cost? And there are already several studies ongoing about especially developing the marginal abatement cost curves. We know also some issues related to incentives about especially the prices. And I see my slide here finally. Okay, so no problem. So you didn't miss much. So yeah, so this is the most important slide, I think, because we are seeing that there are many solutions. This is an example, for example, of the carbon emission target of Ireland. And we see that they have developed a couple of scenarios. So the first two scenarios are based on feed technology and herd management. And the third and fourth scenarios are based really on reducing animal numbers. And of course, in terms of emission reductions, the scenarios that are targeting the animal numbers are really very promising. So up to 50% of emission reduction, which is quite interesting. But then let's look at the numbers in terms of financing and also the economics. We see that, of course, anything that will touch the head will reduce the income. And that's up to 4 billion in terms of economic loss from the agriculture sector. So, of course, a country cannot be, let's say, promote any aspect that will kind of reduce such kind of income to the whole economy. So that's where the problem are. But we see that some solutions that can reduce 18% of emissions are positive in terms of income. So those are the ones that we believe that will be supported by the market. So this is one example. So we want to have such type of study for all the livestock systems around the world, which will help easily the policymakers to make decisions. So, and sometimes we are lacking most of those economic analysis to support our biophysical-based analysis. So I believe this is one of the most interesting parts that we need to add on our research, and especially identifying the key incentives. I see that California has already made a huge progress on this, and really thank you for many examples. And of course, we need to look at how we sustain profitability, especially in a competitive and a volatile market. As you know, with many geopolitical issues that are going around the world, and now the commodity prices are skyrocketing, making really quite difficult for farmers, especially to access the feed. So just to say that we didn't need the short and long-term solutions, and those short and long-term solutions should always bring the economic impacts of the solutions to make sure that they can be easily adopted. And of course, I believe that partnership is important. especially across different livestock stakeholders. So thank you for your attention, and yeah, thank you for putting also the slide.
Well, thank you very much, and my apologies for the technical difficulties. This was a teachable moment for our graduate students, because I always tell you, you have to be able to give a speech without your slides. They never believe me. That was proof. So thank you very much for this, and I also will start questions with you. Now, I met Aimable about 10 years ago when I chaired a United Nations FAO lead partnership project, and I was amazed by the composition of it, because what constitutes it was government and NGOs and industry, along with academicians. Here in the room, we have the same composition. We have all kinds of agencies, we have academicians, we have NGOs, we have industry. How do you evaluate the importance of these public-private partnerships? Sometimes they're criticized, right? Like working with industry is sometimes criticized, let's say in the media or so. How do you view that?
Yeah, thank you. If it's working. Okay, I hope it's working. So thank you, Frank, for the question. And yeah, it's a very difficult but easy question, because I think it's important that, especially being within a UN organization, we have seen that it's important to work with all members, meaning countries, but it's also important to work with all stakeholders. So why working with all stakeholders is important? Because we believe that private sector, we are having many companies, some are national, small scale, others really up to multinational companies that are very influential in terms of supporting production, but also supporting the markets. So we have also many innovative companies that are bringing solutions on the table that we need really to consider. We have also NGOs that are doing advocacy, that are supporting farmers, especially to make sure that this really supporting equity, so to make sure that the fair trade, the equity, those issues are addressed. And we have also the farmers' organization. So in RIP, we are lucky because we have more pastoral farmers' organizations, not really the large-scale farmers' organizations. And that has been a very nice experience, because first was to understand the interest of each part in the debate. Second was also to bring them together. So our aim, for example, is we support the EcoSay, so we make sure that the decisions that are made by the partnership are transparent, and also we provide the floor to everybody to express, and we have agreed to address the problem together. And so far, 10 years, the system is working, and I believe that at national level, we have moved from, let's say, the global issues. Actually, all the countries that I presented this morning, in each country, we conduct the same thing. So we bring the different ministries and private sector, civil society, and also the different NGOs within the country to discuss livestock and climate change, and you see that the debate is different, because you just discover that even agencies, government agencies, don't speak to each other. So, and you see that sometimes decision is made by the Minister of Environment, and the Minister of Agriculture is not aware of that decision. So, and we find out that actually it's important that those multi-stakeholder approaches are really implemented also at country level, is what in the UN CCC they call institutional arrangements. But usually they build the institutional arrangement to collect data, not really to solve problems. So we have really taken the deep approach to the country, and we see that is working. And I would really invite you to explore that area, because climate solution require first to be aware. So the level of awareness is really achieved if we are all working together. So otherwise, and I think, of course, we being criticized is one way, but showing a result is the other way. So, and I prefer the second one. So.
Thank you very much. A question to Denise. Now, you have alluded to significant research dollars being spent in the years to come. Some of that requires research infrastructure. And Do you have any idea as to how we can increase research infrastructure funding in a place like this or also other places?
Yeah, so, is it on? There we go. I think we're going to need to get creative because research infrastructure obviously is an area where we see that there is a big need for an influx of dollars. I think we lack not only additional facilities to conduct the research, but we also have a very limited number of researchers that are well qualified and truly have the training to carry out that those research projects on behalf of the industry. So I think this could be an opportunity where collaboration like the public-private partnerships could be extremely beneficial as long as everybody kind of understands their roles and their responsibilities within the partnership. I think, you know, we've shown in California over years where you can bring together those partnerships and address a problem and help to leverage the strengths of the individual partners to bring money or whatever it is, informational resources, the resources, you know, the ability to reach out and bring more people into the process. And I think that's what we're really going to need to do, because with tightening dollars across the spectrum, you know, no one entity, not the UC, not the industry, not others, they don't have the pockets to be able to bring forth, I feel like, you know, the monetary resources that we're going to need to support us. So we really need to work together to carry it out.
Thank you, Denise. Now, it's one thing to use, let's say, additives, feed additives in intensive systems, such as feedlots or freestall dairies. It's another one as to how we get research done with extensive systems, where we don't have daily access to animals, yet we know that there are significant. Charles, do you think that we should prioritize funding, research funding in one direction over the other, and knowing what the limitations, what the issues are?
No, I think that's a very important consideration to make, seeing how much of the pie is represented by a lot of the dairy systems, the availability of the system for a feed additive application. But also we have to recognize that, you know, the beef sector, you know, the pasture-based management systems here in California are actually trending to growth. And so that'll continue, and it'll continue to be a piece of the pie, and we need to be able to fund research in this area. Otherwise, it also gives us a great opportunity, because a lot of the pasture-based systems are what's going to be applicable internationally. A lot of the low and middle income countries are going to be pasture-based systems. So we have an opportunity to collaborate with some of, again, international bodies to leverage funds to support work in this area. And we could do it, you know, here in California, where we have some capital, and it'd be applicable nationwide and internationally. So I think it's a great opportunity. Obviously, there's a prioritization that needs to occur based on magnitude, but I think we need to give it its due. There should be a set amount set aside for these types of extensive systems, absolutely.
Thank you, Charles. Juan, we have state, federal, and international agencies that are coordinating with industries, with academia, and so on. What do you think needs to be done to make these coordinations or these cooperations most successful?
It's a, can you guys hear me? Yep. Okay. It's a tough situation, because the first thing that's required is just conversation. I am going to say that it's going to go slow before it goes fast, because everybody has, every single piece of those collaborating partners have their own perspective. And everybody will have to compromise. Everybody. Something you're going to have to compromise, right? And so we've been learning that through the Greener Cattle Initiative. And sometimes some of those discussions are tough, right? Because you may have an agenda that doesn't necessarily match exactly with your counterpart's agenda. But what's important is to focus on the common points, not the differences. So if you can direct action to those common points, you have a winner. The differences are going to be picked up by those that need those specific points to get picked up. So not one single initiative is going to do everything. We need them all. And in some cases, we also need individual actors working on their own because they need to address specific points that are only meaningful to themselves.
Thank you very much. We have a couple minutes left to answer questions from the audience. Please show of hands, and then we run around with microphones. There's a question there by Ömias.
All right. I hope you can hear me. Ermias from UC Davis. So my question is to do with capacity, because now we're seeing that there's a lot of opportunities coming up. The CDFA is investing some. The Greener Initiative, the Greener Country Initiative is investing. USDA just came out about $5 million for just specific for Enteric. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So how are we able to do all this? And there are only a few universities right now that have this capability. So how do we expand this capacity to do? And sometimes also there might be researchers doing very similar things. So instead of asking the same questions, how do we get together so that we are asking different questions so we can move all this field forward very quickly?
Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that. Thank you, Ermias, for your question. The biggest thing that we have to recognize first is that researchers will go to where money shows up. And therefore, there are some elements of research funding that are specifically for either capacity building or maintenance. In fact, the US government does make quite a big effort at that. There are funds that come of grants that are to keep those basic abilities going. In the case of enteric methane emissions, there is a global community of scientists that work in this. Everybody basically knows who that community is. I mean, we have opportunities to meet in conferences, and I think that there are good examples of collaboration across even different countries with some of these. There is in my mind, however, the need for identifying certain elements that need to be developed in terms of capacity building. To Aimable's point, where's the data? Show me the data. For example, making sure that there's more ability to collect data. And frankly, that funding is not going to come from private industry, at least not in my experience, So there are going to be some holes that are going to need to be filled by certain funding organizations. And those are tough questions because particularly when you look at the research, at the R&D pipeline, the further away you are from marketplace, the less money that it shows up.
There's another question here.
Secretary Ross mentioned data, Undersecretary Bonnie mentioned data, you guys have all mentioned data, and there's this big gap that we really struggle to actually measure animals in their normal production environment. We can stick them in a chamber, we can have a special device that like a green feed machine where they go to, but we just don't really know exactly what happens out on those rangelands or when weather changes, or there's not that daily feedback loop that a dairy farmer has with their milk production that they have with their emissions. So I don't have a solution to that, but I'm interested in your thoughts on how we can move forward in that space.
You know, I want to share a reflection from this morning that I think it's relative to Ermias in your question. I am personally, this is my personal opinion, I am personally seeing that research and implementation, the lines are being blurred. People are talking about implementation. I mean, you've spoken about some funds that are available for implementation, and I see that lots of people are actually interpreting that as research. And there are different types of data that are required. All of them build confidence, like Aimable was saying. You know, we want to build confidence, but in order to collect the information that speaks to the basic research needs, the type of activity, the type of studies that need to be conducted are different than the ones that are required to understand how to implement a solution in a commercial dairy farm. I have been using the analogy of the vaccines, you know, particularly with this COVID thing, you know, where people were talking about, hey, you know, the efficacy of the vaccine is X%. But in reality, the effectiveness of the vaccine is not really understood until the vaccine is deployed in a real population of interacting human beings, running through an airport, being in a conference, you know. There's so much you can do in a laboratory, and then you have to go and answer different questions with a different system. So I would like all of us to think a little bit about, you know, how can we collaborate and how can we put forth resources to increasing confidence, but also respecting that different questions are answered by different types of studies.
I'd like to add to that just briefly, and I also think a major consideration is at what point in time are we entertaining these studies? Are we going to wait to do this demonstration project before things are approved and determined safe, or are we going to develop the safety, you know, network, vet these to, you know, the nth degree, and then apply it on farm, and then have all these discoveries once we start to deploy this, that it may not be a real practical strategy. So I think there needs to be balance between the two. We always have to make sure that we're taking, obviously, our safety guidance in line, but that also becomes very expensive because there's a lot of production there that you may be losing via milk dump, or even to the extent of culling animals to make sure that, you know, potential products don't end up in the supply chain. So where they're at in their stage of development is going to matter a lot, and I think we have an opportunity to kind of pick and choose where they are and support some longer-term independent studies. Private industry has really far and beyond supported the research, enteric fermentation research in this space until now, and they're still doing so. But now again, it's time for a little bit of balance, some independent research as well to support some of this, so we can have that full scope of data looking at a solution before we can recommend it.
Very good. There's one more question in the back, and then our time is up.
Thank you very much. My name is Oluwafemi, and I'm originally from Nigeria. And my question will be maybe targeted towards Aimable. Thank you for your presentation and every other person. Talking about the fee strategy when it comes to the global view. I know in this part of the world, we seem to have everything working in place, and tracking data and everything seems to be kind of easy when we talk about collecting data for us to do our researches. But basically, personally, for someone like me who come from Nigeria, who knows it's attainable in Africa and the other Asian countries, getting data can be very difficult. And sometimes when we get them, they are not really, quote-unquote, reliable as they should be. And for someone like you who is working in a global organization, how are you working with farmers and also researchers to get the best out of the situation? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I believe it's there is one thing that we are trying to do. As you know, I agree that there are different data for different purposes, but let's look at the MRV that the Undersecretary mentioned this morning on measurement, reporting, and verification. So the first step is that we have difficulty because in many countries, they are not used to collect statistics on livestock. So therefore, when they collect statistics, they only collect the animal numbers. And then, of course, you don't know the category of those animals. If you take a dairy herd, you don't know the different age of animals and the categories, the head parameters, and so on. So therefore, that goes to, of course, to restructuring the herd through modeling, which, of course, creates many incentives. So what we are doing mainly is promoting the proper data collection through the National Bureau of Statistics, which can provide at least sub-regional disaggregated data by sex, production type, and so on, and production systems. And of course, we see that it's very quite slow and sometimes difficult because to do that, of course, you need to increase the budget allocated to conduct all the agriculture survey and also the agriculture census that sometimes countries are not willing to do. So I can say that it's a work in progress, and we see that a few countries, especially the countries that we are focusing on, we see that some have understood that and they have invested a lot to collect very good data. And actually, we just finalized the new analysis for greenhouse gas emissions from Rwanda and Tanzania. And I can tell you that when we compare the moderate values compared to even the measurements, they are quite aligned. And that means that, of course, the effort that those countries are doing, it's not that it's quite easy because it's not really, maybe we need to wait until a couple of years to have many countries really eager to invest money in data collection, because that's the main problem. And I believe it's not only in Africa, it's everywhere actually, because previously data, even in the US, you will see that in the EPA inventory, some parts are moderate because the way the data are gathered by USDA is quite different than what you need to conduct an inventory. So it's a global problem, but I believe that through the different discussions, also demonstration why you need to have the data right, it's bringing a very good conversation, and also some countries are taking action to that. But of course, I see the difficulty of financing, especially changing the understanding of the National Statistical Bureau, because the way they collected data, it was mainly on macroeconomic indicators of the country, and emissions accounting was not part of that. So just they need to understand that that's also one of the elements that countries are reporting on, and of course, any information that is reported to UNCCC is taken as accurate in a sense that it's included in aggregation, and of course, and you can understand how difficult it can be, especially when we are looking at the global contribution of human activities to the climate change. So that's why I believe it's not only the livestock sector, it's all sectors. We have sectors where actually we don't know. We can assume that the energy sector we know, but we don't. So there are many industrial processes that are not transparent. So we don't know what actually is, even material inputs from those industrial processes, because no one is asking them to be accountable. So therefore, they are not providing it. So I would say livestock sector is one of the sectors where we are making huge progress compared to other sectors. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to my panel, Denise, Juan, Aimable, Charles. Greatly appreciated you taking us on this journey on research opportunities and efforts. And I hope you all enjoyed it. Let's give him a round of applause.